introduce each of our guests today. First, we have Ms. Alice Beamsdorfer, the Associate Director of Collections at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And next, we have Mr. Michael Clark, who is Director of National Galleries of Scotland. And last but not the least, we have the Director from the National Palace Museum, Dr. Zhou Gongxing. First, we're going to have several questions for Ms. Beamsdorfer. So the first question is that Philadelphia Museum of Art is one of the largest museums in the world, in the United States especially. May I ask Alice to tell us more about the Philadelphia Museum of Art as well as the artworks that we're going to see at this exhibition?
Well, the Philadelphia Museum of Art is one of the oldest art museums in the United States. It was founded in 1876 on the occasion of the 100th birthday of the United States, when there was a centennial exposition in Philadelphia. Our collection is also one of the largest in the United States. It numbers about almost 250,000 works of art, ranging from very ancient Chinese tomb sculptures to the most contemporary video art. One of the great strengths of the collection is our holdings in the field of Impressionism and modern art. And that's the collection from which we've sent some of our masterpieces to be shown here in Taipei. What you will see really is a snapshot, in a way, of the history of art from the beginnings of Impressionism in the mid to late 19th century, all the way to the development of Cubism and modern art.
And a lot of professors and students and artists are coming to the exhibition. So from a professional point of view, what and how can they learn from these artists as well as their artworks?
Artists are always learning from looking at the work of artists who went before them. Our museum recently organized an exhibition called Cezanne and Beyond, which looked at how artists following Cezanne, continuing up until the present day, have learned from looking at his artwork. I think the other thing that art students and young artists can take away from this exhibition is the fact that many of these artists, Renoir, Cezanne, Van Gogh, did not achieve great success or fame during their lifetimes. And yet they continued to spend their lives devoted to the act of making art because it was so important to them, and they continued to innovate. So I think that's a real inspiration for people as well, just to follow your passion in that way.
So Dr. Zhou, you're an expert in art history, and we know that Impressionism has a great influence on Western art through the invention of new painting techniques. So it not only represents aesthetic heritage, but also continues to inspire the world of art. So may I ask you to talk about the origin of Impressionism and its development and features?
Okay, the name of Impressionist appeared in 1874. In that year, on April 15, this is a group of artists not accepted by the academic school, and then they organize an exhibition, and in that exhibition there's a painting from Monet. The title of this painting is Impression, Soleil Levant. That means the impression, rising sun, and then they take the name for this Impressionist. That's the first appeal. For the Impressionists, they do the painting were in front of the nature until they finish the work. Yeah. And then they reject the objective of realism. They choose the only real factor is the light. and the painter pursue the variation of the light.
So, Michael, a museum is supposed to have 4 important functions: display, education, research, and collection. So how can a museum inspire the general public by offering a unique aesthetic experience?
Well, of course, these days museums are much more developed and more alive to the needs of their users. So those elements you've just been talking about, display, one can be very innovative and provocative in the way one displays the works. Education, reach out to audiences in terms of explanation and provoking reactions with the audience. Collections, well, they can vary from museum to museum, and they should do, really. The idea, in your question, you mentioned a unique aesthetic experience, and really I was going to answer it by saying that the way to achieve that is for every museum to be different, even though it adheres to high standards, not to be homogenized and all the same. I'm reminded of an episode in The Simpsons where the camera pans out to the view down the high street in Springfield, the town where the Simpsons live, and every single shop is a branch of Starbucks. And I don't think we want museums to become like that. So I would also make a plea for more idiosyncratic, more different museums. I mean, some of my favorites around the world include, there's a very funny and interesting little architectural museum in London called the Soane Museum, which is based on the house of the 18th and early 19th century architect Sir John Soane. It's like no other museum in the world. The Musée d'Orsay in Paris, which is home probably to the greatest collection of Impressionist paintings anywhere, is in fact a converted railway station. That poses its own problems, but it also makes it memorable. The Jewish Museum in Berlin by the prominent contemporary architect Daniel Libeskind is very expressive, very opinionated in the way that it's arranged, so that when you go to these museums, you're not only looking at the display, the research, the collections, etc., you're also terribly impressed by the individuality of the container, the building itself, and it makes the whole experience more memorable. So I would make a plea for that as well, if we're talking about a unique aesthetic experience.
So we will see a variety of art genres at this exhibition, such as Impressionism and Cubism. So would you please tell us more about your favorite artists in general and the piece from these genres and why?
Well, of course, it is a marvelous show, this selection from Philadelphia, and as has already been said, the Philadelphia Museum is particularly rich in the late 19th and early 20th century, which is great for me because one of my favorite artists is Claude Monet, perhaps the best known of all the Impressionists. I think there are a total of, is it 5 works? 4 works by him in the show. And the one that, well, I love them all, but the one that I particularly associate is a view of a place called Étretat, dating from 1885. It's a view of the cliff tops in Normandy on the north coast of France, and Monet was living in Normandy, some distance to the north of Paris by that time. And that particular part of the coastline of, well, we call it the English Channel, but the French call it La Manche, that part of the coastline there is very, very dramatic. There are these great high cliffs made out of alabaster, which the elements have been, the sea and the wind and the rain, have been steadily eroding over many millennia. And Monet was really captivated by these coastal rock formations and also by the ever-changing light which you see in the countryside and particularly on the surface of the sea. In fact, if you go there in person, you can't believe some of the colours that Monet puts in the pictures could ever be real, but go there and believe me, they are. In this picture, the sea is almost green. The sea is not normally green like this, but it can be when you're there. And these great rock formations, they have sort of holes in them which you can walk through if you're on the shingle, rather pebbly beach. One of them you can only walk through when the tide is out. You walk through into a little hidden bay, and then if you're too late, the tide comes in and you're stuck there, and you can even drown. But set into the cliff face above you is a series of handholds to get you all safely up to the top. But Monet went there on a number of occasions, and unsurprisingly he was fascinated by this, and this is a particularly wonderful picture showing these dramatic rocks.
So, I mean, that relates to another question, because actually the West and the East have developed different art styles and forms, and culture plays an important factor. So does the humankind have a common view of beauty despite the cultural differences? If so, what is it?
Well, that's an enormously difficult question, and I'm pretty confident I can't give you the answer to it. This whole idea of what is art, what is beauty, is terribly difficult to define, and page after page worth of ink has been spilt trying to answer that question. The oldest artifacts or works that we know of that shows some sign of man wishing to impose an attractive design on, I think, are some drilled snail shells from South Africa, made about 75,000 years ago. Now, I'm quite sure that whoever did that wasn't thinking about art in the sense that we think about it today. The original meaning of the word art, I think, was certainly in the West, meant skill or craft, and it was only relatively recently that it was elevated to much higher status. That said, I mean, evidently both in the East and West for many thousands of years there have been objects made and people appreciating them for their visual qualities. So I suppose that's beginning to speak about what we would call art and beauty. Whether East and West originally were operating on the same criteria, I'm very doubtful indeed. So I think the original answer to your question is no, but of course we now live in the age of globalization, when images can be spread very easily, as Alice was saying, on the net, etc. We all travel much more. We can go to visit each other's countries. There are books, there are illustrations, there are TV programs, etc. So we probably have now developed some common criteria, particular shapes, particular colors, which speak to all of us. But I think that's it's a very welcome, but it's a relatively recent development. And I think as you go back in history, you can't always count on that being so.
So then, from your point of view, what should a museum do exactly to promote an exhibition, to reach out to the general public? And how should it work with other sectors to reach its ultimate goals?
Well, I think museums, and your own museums here in Taiwan, such as the Museum of Fine Arts here in Taipei, where the Philadelphia exhibition is currently showing, are very alive to what one does now to promote exhibitions. Obviously, you need to actively work with the media, with the press, with TV, run good advertising campaigns, speak nicely to the local civic authorities so that you can have all your signage, etc., in prominent places around the city. Work closely with the education authorities so that maximum opportunities to enjoy the exhibition can be offered to school kids, to college students, and the like. Make enterprising approaches to transport companies, the local buses, the taxis, the airlines, etc. So there's a massive amount that we can do these days to promote these exhibitions.
Actually, maybe I should ask Alice the same question, since you just put on this exhibition. So what kind of efforts did you put into it to make this happen?
Well, mostly the Taipei Fine Arts Museum did the marketing, but one of the interesting things was that they've put signs on cars that are driving through the city. They're going to have a bunch of the cars walking through, lots of signage. In the United States, we're also